Who has the best head coach in the NFL? Well, we're going to continue tiering all 32 of them today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day. And, of course, a big welcome and shout-out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Joe, happy, Thursday to you here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Another week is zipping by. We're past the 4th of July. Hey, we have training camp this month. There's like some rookies who are reporting like less than 2 weeks from now.
Smell that?
Who said there's a dead period?
No. Yeah, there's not. The football is king all year.
Can't imagine.
Doesn't stop.
Basketball free agency takes place like 3 days after the end of the finals.
What's up with Adam Schefter just retweeting every piece of NBA news? And of course, he's the one person who I'm subscribed to their tweets or whatever, so I get a notification. So I like all day long, it's been
just turn it off.
Yeah, I want the NFL news though.
You don't get any NFL news right now.
It's insane.
You waiting for the Dalvin Cook Dolphin signing? Or
there's basketball players I've never heard of that are getting like $15 million a season.
Yeah, Fred Van Fleet got like 30 per or something like that. It's just crazy.
Got to work on my damn jump shot, man.
Right, Dame Lillard requested a trade over the weekend.
We'll see.
Dame time. South Florida, probably.
Hornets did a good job not picking him and going with Michael Kidd-Gilchrist instead. That was really good.
Some hard luck with the Charlotte basketball team, huh?
Yeah, they stink.
Yeah. Well,
New owner, maybe. All right.
Tepper. Dave Tepper will bring talent to basketball.
Yeah.
In Charlotte.
He'll bring winning basketball.
Along with concerts.
Right. Thank God he's here. We can go to concerts.
You asked at the top of the show who the best coach was in the NFL. I think we probably answered that technically yesterday for anybody who missed yesterday's show, which was we did the modern GOAT tier. Mm-hmm. And that was a slew of coaches that probably the vast majority of are going to end up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That was Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin, Sean McVay, Bill Belichick, Sean Payton, John Harbaugh. Mid-show got elevated into that tier. That's our top tier. Put them in whatever order you want. Argue with your wall, argue with your cat. We don't care what order you put them in from there. But the second half of this, we got through the top 13 coaches in tiers, not necessarily in order, but in tiers. It's really interesting. And we actually have a very interesting first group up here today, Joe, with our Scheme Whiz tier. Guys that are very widely regarded for what they bring to the table on their respective side of the football.
So, do you want to introduce the names and then talk about them here?
Yeah, we'll rip through the names real quick. I'll do that. I think the first name that we have listed is rightfully the first name that we do have listed. Not that this is going in order, but the resume of winning seasons here versus a lot of other younger coaches that are relatively new. Matt LaFleur with the Green Bay Packers is in the Scheme Whiz tier. Brian Daboll of the New York Giants, the job that he did last year. Mike McDaniel with the Miami Dolphins. Kevin O'Connell with the Minnesota Vikings. And then our only defensive Scheme Whiz, Brandon Staley, the Los Angeles Chargers.
I think, notwithstanding Brandon Staley, the first group there, LaFleur, Daboll, McDaniel, O'Connell, Staley, or not Staley, excuse me. Those guys had quick success with their respective places. And for some of them, Daboll, McDaniel, and O'Connell, we're very curious to see how things evolve
right
in their second season and what those counter punches are going to be. That's what's fascinating. And I think all of those teams winning, all of those teams getting to the playoffs in year one is so good for the path forward and getting that buy-in from the locker room and kind of spreading some buzz throughout the league that, hey, this is a good situation. You can come here, you can be successful. And I think that goes a long way in starting your tenure. I think it's tough when you credit to Zac Taylor, right? Because like those first couple seasons were really, really
Two
bumpy.
seasons were bad. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously you get Joe Burrow, things change, but it's hard to get those narratives away from you. I think those guys really set themselves up well by winning in year one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And obviously Matt LaFleur, a little bit of a different dynamic around the team this year. We're fascinated to see that. I think if they bounce back, you would have a very strong argument to put LaFleur in the persisting contenders bucket.
Yeah, and look, I think one thing that Matt LaFleur deserves a lot of credit for is the success that the team had despite impossible to deal with dynamics that existed with Aaron Rodgers.
For sure. Yeah.
Like, hey, you get to go be the coach of the Packers. Oh, by the way, Aaron Rodgers is just always going to be pissed off and like good luck trying to make him happy and all that type of stuff. And then he got 2 MVP seasons out of the guy.
Right.
It's incredible.
Right. Yeah. I would say what Brian Daboll did scheme-wise is the most impressive of any of these guys because they had no talent offensively. I mean, they had Saquon Barkley, Andrew Thomas.
Right.
Daniel Jones is an adequate level starting quarterback who I think there is a little bit more ceiling to tap into with better supporting cast, but he fixed the biggest issue with Daniel Jones, the turnover bug that was such a prominent thing with him. That job with that supporting cast offensively and what they were able to do, I think was one of the more impressive overall coaching jobs that we saw last season, regardless of your record or expectations minus reality.
Yeah,
it was disappointment, right? And they were in the surplus in the best possible way.
I'd like to talk about Mike McDaniel, head coach of the Miami Dolphins. I think his counterpunch is the most fascinating counterpunch in the entire NFL this year.
It's not hard. Run the ball.
Well, yeah, but do it, right?
Run the ball.
It is run the ball, right? I mean, obviously the passing game was so good last year, and obviously when you have this speed that exists in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and how quickly they can get to spots, Tua is a very quick triggered quarterback that's very accurate. I mean, that in and of itself is difficult to deal with. Now, how do you kind of build out the rest of it? How do you get that third guy going with any level of consistency in the passing game? Is that Robbie Chosen? Is that Braxton Berrios? But then from there, the bigger question is the run game. And is there going to be a bigger commitment to it? I thought there would be last year, given his background with the 49ers. And at times I thought it looked good, but at most of the time I thought there was a lack of commitment, especially in key spots. And I think they got some really good looks. Linebackers played with a lot of depth against Miami. You feel like you had
two high safeties and linebackers playing with depth.
Like that should be good. That should be good to run the football.
You have to run the football.
Right. So that counterpunch is really fascinating to me. I mean, they've added Isaiah Wynn to the O-line. Devin Achane gives them more speed to go with Mostert and Wilson in that backfield. But how that evolves this year is critical. And that's huge, but also him maturing a little bit. And there was some procedural issues from time to time that hurt the football team. So his counterpunch is huge. Obviously, the defense there should be much, much improved. But that counterpunch from Miami is really fascinating.
Then you have Kevin O'Connell. Another team that I think Minnesota had a much higher floor of expectations than what New York did last year. But you just talk about wins and losses and expectations. And again, you go back to situational football. It felt like Minnesota pushed the right button late in every single game in a 1-score game to win the football game. So, ironically enough, until they played Minnesota in the playoffs, right?
Yeah. Well, the Giants played Minnesota, of course, right?
Right. That's what I mean. Yeah. So then the Giants ending Minnesota's season in the postseason. But I think Kevin O'Connell, the most important thing for him was he came in and achieved what he was supposed to achieve. When you think about being an offensive mind, having the system that you wanted to run, you were effective on the ground, even if from an efficiency standpoint, Dalvin Cook wasn't the most effective version of himself. You have an established offensive line with some talent. You kind of stabilize that group. Kirk is the quintessential put me in a good situation and I'll produce a lot of yards and points for you. and obviously having Justin Jefferson, and they've tried to retool what else is around them with the rest of that supporting cast. But I think that was a very positive first step, of course, based off the wins and losses last year.
All right, we've got 4 more tiers to get to the rest of
It'll
the
go
way.
quick.
So
It'll go quick.
buckle up, folks. But before we get there, take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just $20, and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 that you can bet on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. Simply no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
All right, our next tier. We now have GOATs, the top shelf, the modern top shelf coaches, the young guns, persistent contenders, scheme whizzes. Now I have a couple old school football guys. This next tier down. And I think that this tier, alongside the scheme whiz tier, I think you could kind of commingle those coaches in rankings in whatever order you would want if you were trying to do it linearly. And you wouldn't draw much of an argument from me. I think Frank Reich, as the first old school guy with the Carolina Panthers, deserves a ton of credit for the staff that they put together, but it is his second attempt at being a head coach. Things did not end particularly well in Indianapolis. Not that I necessarily think a lot of the problems were Frank Reich's fault. And then Dan Campbell is the other one with the Detroit Lions.
You know what stands out to me about both those guys is leadership, right? Like, you don't have any questions that those guys can command rooms, really, get a lot of respect and kind of set the tempo for an organization, maybe in slightly different ways.
Too.
Yeah, both former players. Frank Reich's obviously one of my favorites. And part of that, of course, is because he plays for the Bills. And then my brother actually played for his brother in college. But Frank Reich is just, I love his messaging. I love the way he talks. He's very transparent. And I mean, even coming out of the Matt Ryan situation this past year with the Colts, and where he's like, I think we really let down Matt Ryan. We didn't have the play action game. We didn't have the run game that we promised him, and it didn't set him up to be successful. Like, I love that level of accountability that he delivers. And, I'm excited for him to be in Carolina. Obviously he had his choice of quarterbacks, went with Bryce Young. They've very quickly added a ton of coaching talent, like you mentioned, as well as roster upgrades. And I think he's in a great spot. And I don't think he deserved to be dismissed in Indianapolis. And I think that he's a guy that will be an even better coach, I think, this go around with Carolina.
Meanwhile, you want to talk about accountability and seeing that up close and personal. How about Dan Campbell on Hard Knocks last year? You had a chance to see very much what Dan Campbell is all about. And I know I did the stand on the podium for Doug Peterson thing yesterday, but if I was picking what head coach I would want to play for, Dan will coach you hard, but Dan will love you up. Dan will be honest with you. He'll shoot it straight. He's been in the shoes of players. He's right up there near the top for me. Now, a little bit more of a CEO type when you consider Aaron Glenn on the defensive side of the ball and Joe's favorite offensive coordinator of all time on the offensive side of the ball. But I think his experience as a player and him being groomed under Sean Payton and having the interim opportunity in Miami, there was a lot of meaningful exposures here that kind of built him into this stage. And I love the fact that team turned it around the second half of last year. But the challenge for them is going to be rolling that into a new season and sustaining that momentum. We'll see how ready he has them to be.
See him night one in Kansas City.
In Kansas City. And we'll find out real quick.
We will.
Just how ready to play football you are. Yep.
All right, so we have the need more from you tier coming up here. And this tier includes Kevin Stefanski with Cleveland Browns, Robert Saleh, New York Jets, Arthur Smith from the Falcons, Matt Eberflus from the Chicago Bears.
Should we start with Saleh?
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
That feels like the most buzzy team with New York, and the defensive turnaround that they had last year, and but let's just get the offense right. And they've made some monumental changes. But I think at the end of the day, when you boil down Robert Saleh's resume beyond defensive rankings last year, there is, especially in New York, a little bit of that pressure to win, right? And I don't know that 8-9 is going to give anybody the warm and fuzzies based off of the moves that the New York Jets made. But 8 wins would be the most that Robert Saleh's had as a head coach. So it's like, okay, like you have built this program. You've been given a couple years. Now it's time it's almost the put up or shut up tier for the coordinators that we were talking about. That's what I think the parallel is for this staff, especially when you look at Stefanski, and they peaked in year 1 under Stefanski, and it's been 2 years of trying to recapture that. And Atlanta, it's consecutive 7-win seasons, and Eberflus, where year 2 for him, they have these questions around their young quarterback that they've remained committed to and made some dynamic personnel changes to upgrade that group and excited for it. But when you're building and Chicago's as bad as Chicago was, obviously earned the number 1 overall pick, you got to start stacking it and moving the goal line further down, in my opinion.
Kyle, you mentioned 8 wins for the Jets. They hadn't won 8 games since 2015. I mean, it's been a while.
That was 10-6 with Fitz.
Yeah, Todd Bowles' first season.
And then the next time before that.
Well, they had the Rex Ryan couple
right,
of
but I'm saying that the last time they won 10 games before that was
2010. Rex Ryan's second season.
Yeah, and that was in the AFC Championship game runs where they played in the Conference Championship game twice in 2 years. So obviously their drought of playoff appearances, it's over a decade now.
Yep.
Without making the postseason, right? So like that pressure on top of everything looks so good at the first half of the season, and then the wheels fell off the bus and they finished 7-10. You can't afford to post 7-8 wins again this year.
Arthur Smith's also in this bucket with the Atlanta Falcons. And I'll say this, I mean, the Falcons haven't necessarily been a good team, but I think they've won 7 games in each of his first 2 seasons. He may have overachieved. He may have gotten a little bit more than I expected out of both teams to have those moments and kind of be in it even kind of late in the season. His first year was pretty impressive to me. And so I feel like he's got what he needs defensively now. I mean, a lot of young talent, 3 top 10 picks at the skill players, their offensive line solidified. Obviously, Desmond Ridder, a roll of the dice there at quarterback. But I feel pretty optimistic about him in this group to deliver the more that we need from them that earn them a spot in this tier.
Anything else on the need more from you bucket?
No, but the next 2 tiers, or at least the next tier, is going to be pretty fascinating. So stick with us here as we continue tiering the 32 NFL head coaches today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
Joe, I think this is universally our favorite tier, just based off the smile on your face and the reaction that you had when we were in pre-production. And
it's the big old collection of my favorite coaches in the league. Here they are.
Named this tier. There's 5 coaches in it. It's the Devils you know, as compared to the Devils you don't. There are appealing things about these coaches, but there are also persistent flaws for coaches who, for the most part, I mean, these are all second-time head coaches. There are no first gigs here. This is at least your second rodeo as a head coach.
Wow.
Team. So we kind of know, right? For better or for worse. And finding an upgrade might be hard, and that's why some of these guys might be here. But for better or for worse, the Devils you know as compared to the Devils you don't. Ron Rivera, Washington Commanders. Mike McCarthy, Dallas Cowboys. Todd Bowles, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Josh McDaniels, the Las Vegas Raiders. And Dennis Allen of the New Orleans Saints.
I got to do the thing with Ron Rivera, right?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll
12
check out.
seasons, 12 seasons as an NFL head coach. 3 times he's had a winning record.
It's the devil you know.
Man, it's
But
incredible.
He's got a great locker room culture and does stuff the right way and high integrity.
Yeah.
It's the devil you know.
It's all true. It's all true, especially in Washington where it's like kind of makes sense, right? Based on where they're kind of coming out of and ownership change there, all that. Like, feels like a very good stabilizing guy, but like there's been no consistent winning throughout Ron Rivera's entire career. And you know what? Also fast, I'm going to switch to Dennis Allen here.
Go ahead.
Because we got into this a couple days ago when you and I were kind of prepping for another show. The guy was 8-28 with the Raiders and got a second opportunity to be a head coach. And maybe that had something to do with Sean Payton's retirement and just having a very natural opportunity to stick him in there. But
And also like a 10-year gap, right?
I don't know about that. Like, this guy goes 8-28 and gets another shot and it's like, looks not great again. I don't know. Like, he doesn't seem dynamic enough for me to be an NFL head coach.
Speaking of coaches who were horrible their first time around, how about Josh McDaniels in Denver? Really off the wall personnel decisions. Obviously, they won a playoff game his first year, right?
Tim Tebow.
But then didn't make it to the end of his second year. That's how bad it got.
Yeah. They were 8-8 that first year, right?
Yes. 8-8, but won a playoff game.
Incredible.
Did not make it to the end of year 2. Gets hired by the Colts. Backs out the night before. Goes to Las Vegas. Takes over a playoff team. Team lands a top 10 overall pick. I don't know that they're definitively better in any area of the roster than they were last year.
Yeah, that team won 10 games the year before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I've talked about this with you. I listened to Mike Mayock on the Chris Long podcast. And Mayock's like, say what you want. We took a 3-win team, and in 3 years, we won 10 games and went to the playoffs. And here we are, 6-11 in year 1 under Josh McDaniels.
And this feels like just as much of a transition year as last year did.
Oh, more. It's more of a transitional year.
It was like, can we make it work with Derek Carr? No. Okay, you got to go. We'll just land the quarterbacks because they got Hoyer
right.
and Garoppolo.
Right.
And the third is Aiden O'Connell right now. So the influence of McDaniels as the coach in personnel, I think, is the concessions that you make to get the scheme in place.
The goofy run in Denver, the backing out on the Colts, and now this. Like, what are we doing?
You got to win this year. Now,
well, and then
I don't think they'd fire him at the end of this year if it doesn't go well. But regardless, I think there's significant pressure in Las Vegas.
And haven't we heard for like 100 years about cash flow issues with the Raiders? Like, I'm sure part of that is not paying coaches to not be your head coach. You signed up for this? I don't know, man. I have questions about that.
Speaking of signing up for it, do you want to do Dallas or Tampa? The last two, because we're not going to have too much to say about the new hires, which is the final tier.
Well, I guess let's talk about Mike McCarthy in Dallas, because what's really interesting about him, he doesn't seem like a great coach, but he's got a pretty impressive resume.
He does.
And I know you could say Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott, but I mean, the guy's 155 and 97 in 16 seasons. That's a 614 winning percentage, which is pretty freaking good. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 double-digit win seasons in 16 years.
That Marty Schottenheimer coaching tree looking real good.
You Marty Schottenheimer? You Martied him?
Well, no.
Was he with them in Kansas City? He was.
He's on the Marty Schottenheimer coaching tree, yeah.
I've never made that connection until right now. He was
Really?
part of that Schottenheimer staff in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. No, I didn't know that. Or I'd never connected those dots, at least.
Now, his coaching tree is a different story. Mike McCarthy's
Yeah.
Joe Philbin, Ben McAdoo.
Not great.
I think we'll find out a lot more about McCarthy this year with the coaching staff changes that were made in Dallas, which puts McCarthy very much more imprint on the offense as compared to Kellen Moore. They're gonna have a great defense. They're gonna win. They're gonna win double-digit games against this year. But I don't think it's gonna be because of the offensive scheme. I don't know that it's gonna be because of Mike McCarthy and his management of the team on game day or anything like that.
Marty Schottenheimer won 6 playoff games in 21 years as a head coach.
Mhm.
Mike McCarthy has 11 in 16 years. I mean, that's a lot better.
It is. I wasn't calling him Marty Schottenheimer to be derogatory to his postseason success. I was just saying he's the win on the Marty Schottenheimer coaching tree.
Fascinating. Who's the other one here?
Todd Bowles.
How do you not watch the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year and feel like that was an extremely poorly coached football team?
It was the exact same thing as the last 2 years in New York, too. Like, it's just the same thing. And this time you managed to do it with a declining Tom Brady, but nevertheless did it with Tom Brady.
I don't want to defend Tom, but I mean, that offensive line was in shambles all year long, and Byron Leftwich was a complete disaster at offensive coordinator. No ability to run the football whatsoever. He threw the ball over 700 times. I defended Tom Brady and Bill Belichick a lot this week, Kyle.
313 points scored. Here's a fun fact. What season did Tampa Bay score their least amount of points in franchise history, and how many points did they score?
Offensively?
Yes.
I don't know. Josh Freeman year or something like that?
No. You got to go back to the 70s.
Oh, God. I have no idea.
Twice in franchise history, they scored less points than they scored in the 9-game 82 strike-shortened season.
The kicker MVP season.
Right. 1977 and 1976 were their worst 2 seasons offensively, their first 2 seasons in the league. Across those 28 games, Tampa, in their first 28 games in franchise history, 228 points in 28 games. They scored 103 points in 1977.
What's this building to?
Well, I was just looking at what they scored last year with 313 and that not being a good season. But in reality, Tampa's been playing since 76, and the 313 points offensively that they scored last season, in spite of being like 200 points less than what they scored the previous year, is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17th highest scoring season in franchise history, 313 points last year.
It's fine though, Kyle. They're not worried about it.
They're unconcerned.
Unconcerned.
We were told they were unconcerned.
If you've been listening to this podcast for the last year, you know all about what we just did right there. So,
massive regression last year, to say the least, and I don't think it's getting any better.
No.
New hires last year: D'Amico Ryan, Shane Steichen, Jonathan Gannon.
We should say new hires that are first-time head coaches, because like we have Frank Reich, new hire, but he's in a different planet here. But who are you most optimistic about those?
D'Amico Ryans.
Because of Stroud?
Because of Stroud, because of his defensive prowess. I think that they have some really nice building block pieces. I think Stroud is a higher floor quarterback. He's not a higher ceiling quarterback than Richardson. But I think there's more work to be done to get it right around the player like Richardson than what I think CJ Stroud, you project him forward. I'm a little bit more comfortable with that projection. So kind of factoring in both sides of the ball and the state of that division, I'll go D'Amico Ryans.
I feel like I want to go D'Amico Ryans, but I'm excited about Shane Steichen as well.
Of course you are.
I am.
I've heard saying. I'm excited about both of them. I think they're both going to do a nice job.
I mean, I'm not excited about Jim Irsay, but Steichen with a toolsy quarterback, with a decent nucleus in place.
Right? You can put it all together.
Yeah.
And I think they will, but we'll find out. And we hope to find out that you all came back and saw us again tomorrow on yet another episode of Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He's Joe Marino. Appreciate the everydayers who are locked in with us on a daily basis because it is your teams every day here on the Locked On Network. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We're out of here. Peace.